So in this session, we're going to look at the web browser control that was introduced in 2019 R2 and then enhanced in 2019 R3. First, we have a legal disclaimer. Now let's go over the agenda. So first, in case people aren't familiar with who I am, I would just introduce myself briefly, and then we'll talk about the features of this new control, how to use the web browser set and get methods to work with the properties of the control. We'll talk about what some of those properties are. We'll also look at the events and functions of the web browser control, and then we're going to look at the enhancements that are coming in 2019 R3, and then I'll go ahead and do a demo. So my name is Bruce Armstrong. I work for a company called Integrated Data Services. I've been there since 2004. Prior to that, I spent 15 years as an independent contractor doing PowerBuilder development. When I joined the company in 2004, they were a PowerBuilder client-server shop, an ISV writing applications for customers. We've since migrated most of the applications over to HTML5 JavaScript with Java in the middle tier. However, we do still have some customers using the PowerBuilder version of the applications. In addition to PowerBuilder, I know Oracle PL SQL, Java, C#, and not quite fluent in it, but I do some C++ as well. I'm involved in a number of open source projects, one of those being the open source PFC libraries that most PowerBuilder developers are probably familiar with. I wrote a utility called PBNI SMTP. It's a PowerBuilder native interface. That means it uses C++, and it's an extension for PowerBuilder to send email via SMTP. And I also wrote some plugins for Jenkins. One of them in particular uses the auto-compile capability that was introduced in 2017 and is still available in 2019 to do command line compiles, so that if you wanted to do automatic compiles of your application using Jenkins, you could do that. So if you're looking at perhaps continuous integration, that may be something you're interested in. A little bit about the company I work for, and let's get into the features. Okay, so the web browser control works not only on web-based files, but you can also display local files as well. You can use, it supports HTML5 JavaScript. It supports Flash, and the reason I put until December 2020 on there is as of December 31st, 2020, Adobe discontinues all support for the Flash browser plugin. A number of the web browser vendors are going to discontinue support for it as well on or before that date. The thing is, the Chromium control that they're using under the covers here for this browser control, that will have to be updated by Appeon at some point. And when that update comes along, Flash will probably be desupported as well in this control. So you may be able to use it after December 2020, but that will be probably short-lived. Anyway, moving on. Common video formats are supported. Printing whatever page you have rendered as PDF, and as well viewing PDF files is supported by the browser. It has multi-language support, and it has Zoom capability. Okay, so the web browser get and the web browser set methods are how you set the properties of the control. Now it's a separate PowerScript method that you can call even before the control gets instantiated, and there's a reason for that. Some of the properties that you're going to want to work with have to be set before the control gets instantiated, and after the control is instantiated, they can't be changed. That's why it's a separate PowerScript method. So there's the get method. You can pass in the name of a setting, and it will return what the setting value is. If you're going to do a set, you pass in the setting and the string value. The return code is either success. -7 will tell you that you've attempted to modify one of those properties that can only be modified before the control is initiated. -8 says that the setting value you tried to pass in doesn't exist. And 9 tells you if you're trying to put in a setting that is like a file directory for, let's say, downloading files or whatever. If you've given an incorrect path, an invalid path, you'll get a -9 error back out. So let's take a look at some of what those settings are. One of these is the cache path. So, it has to be set before the control is initiated, and it has to be an absolute, not a relative reference. Same with the user data path. Okay, and then user agent, that's not a path on the local file system. What that is that's a header value that's sent out on every request from the browser control. That also must be set before the control is initiated. None of these can be changed once the control is started. Download path. It also must be set before the control, not before it's initiated, but before it ever starts to download files. And once again, it must be an absolute, not a relative path. Look at the proxy settings. Okay, so there's a number of them here. So there's a auto proxy, which can be set to 1 or 0, basically true or false. You can do a proxy pack URL, so you can provide an external, hosted location where there's a what's called a pack file that contains the proxy settings, or you can just manually provide the address, port, username, or password. Now there is a hierarchy because you could actually set all these values. So there's a hierarchy. Auto takes precedence over everything else. So if you say auto, what it's going to do is it's going to read the IE settings and use those settings. If you set that to false and you provide a proxy pack URL, that will get used, and all the rest of these settings will get ignored. If you've got that set to 0 and nothing for the pack URL, and you provide values for the rest of these, then they get used. As I mentioned, the IE proxy settings are used by default. Now here's there's a little variation. If you set it before the control is initiated, it affects all the pages. You can actually change it after the control is initiated, but it will just affect whatever the next page you load is. Okay, let's look at some more of the properties. A context menu. What that means is on many web pages you can right-click and you'll see something like View Page Source. You may see some other options there. If this is set to true, then the user can do that. If this is set to false, then the users can't right-click in the, well, they can right-click, but they won't get a menu. The default URL is just the string that you're going to load when the control first is instantiated. Once again, that's one of the things that you need to set before the control is instantiated. It doesn't have any effect afterwards. And the pop-up window. What this has to do with is if you click on a link that is set to do target new, in other words, what it would do in most browsers is it would open a new tab and it would display the page in that new tab. This controls what happens with the web browser when you hit one of those links. If it's set to false, what happens is that, because the web browser only shows one page, so what it's going to do is if you click on a link that's a new link, it's going to replace the current page with the new page. If you've got this set to true, what it will do is actually pop open a window outside of your application that has the new page in it. There's a whole bunch of events on the control. So whenever an address changes, it will show you what the new URL is. If there's a certificate error, you'll get all kinds of information about what went wrong. If you're doing a download, you have a download starting event and a download state changed event. When you're navigating through web pages, if there's a navigation error, you get some information about that. There's an event that fires periodically while a page is loading, letting you know what the progress is. There's an event that fires when the navigation starts and when there's a state change. when you get the state changed, a couple of the pieces of information you get here are information about whether the user can go forward and back. Some web pages block going back once they're launched, and so you would get a false here. And then go forward wouldn't make sense unless you've already gone back. So if you've clicked through a few pages, you go back a few pages, and now you get the ability to go forward. PDF print finished. If you're printing to a PDF file, that's the event that fires with the results. Resource redirected, just to let you know that there was a resource redirect. And when the title of the page changes, there's a event that fires for that. In the demo I'm going to show you, I have a little status window off to the right, and I capture all these events, and I stick that status information in the status window there on the side, so you can see what kind of information you're getting out of all these different events. There's a number of functions you can call in the control. Cancel download, that's assuming you started a download, we'll cancel it. There's also the ability to pause it, and if you've paused it, to resume it. There is a function that will get the source for the current page. There are the functions that allow you to move backwards and forward in the URL history. There's the function that you use primarily, which is you give it the name of URL, and the browser will navigate to that page. There's a print as PDF option. There's a refresh, just like on a normal browser where you have that refresh button, that kind of recycle thing on the top. It will just refresh the current page. There's a stop navigation. Usually when a page is downloading, you'll have like a little X at the top where the refresh button normally is, to allow you to stop the navigation, particularly if you've got some sort of load error and the page isn't coming up correctly. You might want to stop navigation. And then there's the ability to zoom, and you can specify the zoom level. That's everything that came in 2019 R2, and now we go over some of the enhancements in 2019 R3, mainly having to do with JavaScript. The issue with the initial version of the control is that it would render pages, but you couldn't really interact with it too much. This gives you the ability to interact with the pages now. So we have the ability to evaluate JavaScript. We can do it asynchronously or synchronously. If you do it synchronously, you pass in the JavaScript that you want to evaluate, and because it's synchronous, you can get the results back right away. So there's a string variable you pass in by reference for both that have the result and any error messages. If you do it asynchronously, that means the JavaScript is going to go off and do its thing, but your function call is going to end. Well, what happens is it calls this evaluate JavaScript finished event when it's done, and it passes back to you any result and any error. And then finally, you can create a custom event on the control, and then you can call this register event, and that makes the event available to JavaScript for JavaScript to interact with. And then if you don't want it to interact with the event anymore, you can call unregister event, and it will turn off the ability for JavaScript to access that event. Okay, one other enhancement for 2019 R3 is the support for basic and digest authentication. So if the page requires authentication, at least basic and digest, the user will be prompted for credentials. If they enter bad credentials, they'll just be prompted over again to enter the correct credentials. If they enter the correct credentials, then obviously the page would then display. Okay, so let's go ahead, and before we finish up here, let's take a look and see what the controller really looks like. So here's my sample application where I try to demonstrate as much as I can of all the different features that I discussed during the session. One of the things I wanted to point out here, this is my custom event that the JavaScript is going to call. It's going to take a value that JavaScript is passing in and return this much longer string back to the JavaScript, and then that in turn, when I call the evaluate function, it's either going to return it directly, or if I do it asynchronously, it will end up resulting in this event being called, passing the result in there. Either way, I show it in a message box. So you can see the JavaScript being evaluated, it turning around and interacting with the web browser control, and then returning information to the web browser or to the function we called. So let's go ahead and run this. Apparently I got some change something. Okay, so I set the default URL to Google. That's what we got. Just to show that, well, actually one of the things I'll show here, notice I right click and I've got all the menu options here. I'm going to hit this context menu, and in my code I trigger refresh the page, and now take my word for it, I am right clicking and nothing is happening. I hit context menu again to re-enable it, and now you can right click again. So that's the context menu operating. Notice this is the status window I was talking about, where I'm taking all these events that are on the browser control, and I'm sending the status information over here into this window. So you can see the navigation progress, the navigation started, the title changing, all that information that you're getting, that you can watch for when you're using the control. So let's take a look at some of the different features. Here's HTML5. So this is Google Maps, and as you can see, you can interact with it just like if you just fired it up in a normal browser. We'll do Flash. As I mentioned, Flash obviously is being desupported in another month or so, but you can use it while it lasts. And you actually get video, you get the audio here too. I have to talk over it. Or you can do videos.
You can't always plan when you'll need a gun. Rational gun owners carry not because it's a weapon, but because it's a shield.
Interesting ad there. Let's try PDF.
Requesting a flyby.
In case you forget to file your income taxes, there's your form. And not only can you display, but you, as we'll see here in a bit, you can print a PDF as well. Multi-language support. So this is the Rail Europe site, currently displaying in English. I'm going to click up here and I'm going to change it to German or to Spanish. Yeah, so everything's working fine. While I'm on this page, I happen to know for sure these links down here do attempt to open into a new window, which on most browsers would result in a new tab opening. So if I click on there now, this is the pop-up menu that you get, or pop-up window I should say that you get. So that's what happens is if you have pop window set to true. I'm going to close that. I'm going to turn pop window off. I'm going to refresh the page. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom again, click it this time, and it's going to load in the browser page. So a new link would essentially just navigate to that page. While I'm here, I'm going to show you the go back. So we're going to go back to the previous, we can actually go back all the way back to English, and we can go forward again. So that's the navigating back and forward, zooming. Okay, so let's see what else is on here. This is a GIF file. Now this is a local file, not a web-based. Notice the URL prefix. Same thing here. This is a local Flash file rather than a web-based Flash file. And and this I thought was kind of interesting. You can also, this is C# code that I'm displaying. So you can render quite a few different things in the control, not just web pages. So we've covered the, let's do print to PDF, but let's do something more interesting than this. Let's go back to the the Rail Europe site. And looks like I've got in Spanish, and I'll print the PDF. And now I go and check out that file. There you go. And it's not a single page. If this was if that page had been multi-pages long, you would have gotten a multi-page PDF. This is the settings, and as I mentioned during the session, the user data path, once you've set it and the browser is initialized, you can't change it. I'm not sure why I've got this editable, because I believe that's the same thing for catch path. The download path is editable until you do a download, and then you can't change it. And you saw the proxy settings there as well. Okay, so the last thing to show here is the JavaScript interaction. This is the stuff that was added in 2019 R3. So I'm going to register the event, and that lets the control now, allows the JavaScript to interact with the event on the control, and I'll do an asynchronous call. So what that did is it called some JavaScript. The JavaScript called the event on the web browser control and took that string and added it on to the rest of this, and then it returned it to the JavaScript. And then this is the JavaScript evaluation, JavaScript finished event that is then displaying the value and any error messages. That was called asynchronously, where we call the function and that triggers an event on the control, or we can evaluate it synchronously, which means it does it all within the function. So you pass in a string by reference and for the result and for the error code, and then this is just showing the same thing happening. The event on the browser control was called from the JavaScript, and then this was the result we got, and once again, no errors. So I think that covers just about everything. So we'll go back to the slides. One thing I will point out here on community.appian.com is that most people know, if they know about it at all, they know about it because of the Q&A forums that are on that site. But there's a lot more on that site. I've got a number of tech articles on there, and I put sample code up there. And the sample code you just saw demonstrating how to use this control is available on that site as well. So you can download it and you can go through it and tear it apart and do whatever you want with it. So that being said, I thank you for your attention, and I hope you enjoy the rest of Elevate 2020.